The woman's name was Sarah Vane, and for the last 16 years, she had walked like a ghost through the corridors of power. No one noticed her, and that was exactly how she liked it. She was not a soldier, not a spy in the traditional sense, but something far more dangerous, a quiet specialist in human weakness. Her body was lean and unremarkable, her face forgettable. She dressed in plain clothes, spoke in a soft monotone, and could stand in a crowded room for an hour without a single person remembering her face. But her legs were her secret. They were not ordinary legs. They were weapons forged from years of brutal, silent training in a forgotten dojo in the mountains of northern Thailand. She could generate force from her hips that could shatter a brick wrapped in leather. She could snap a kick faster than most people could blink. But she had never used that power in anger. Not until the day the Navy SEALs came. The mission was classified so deeply that even the generals who signed the orders did not know the full truth. Somewhere in the tri-border region of South America, where law was a suggestion and power belonged to the highest bidder, a man named Eladio Cruz had built an empire. He was not a drug lord or a terrorist. He was something worse. He was a collector. Cruz collected people with extraordinary skills: snipers, hackers, bomb makers, and broken geniuses, and he sold their talents to the highest bidder. For 5 years, intelligence agencies had tried to infiltrate his compound. Every attempt failed. His security was a nightmare of motion sensors, drone patrols, and a private army of former Special Forces operators. The only way in was through a single door. And that door was guarded by something no one expected. Cruz had 2 personal bodyguards known only as the twins. They were not actually siblings, but they moved and thought as one. Both were former Olympic-level fighters from a brutal Russian combat system called Sistema Spetsnaz. They had been dishonorably discharged for excessive violence, but Cruz had found them and given them a home. Each stood 6'4" and weighed 240 pounds of dense, corded muscle. Their hands were scarred from years of breaking bones. Their eyes were empty. They had never lost a fight. In the underground circuits of Moscow and Bangkok, they were legends. Together, they had beaten 17 men to unconsciousness in under 3 minutes. They did not use weapons. They did not need to. Their specialty was synchronized brutality. One would distract, the other would destroy. And they had never, in 8 years of service to Cruz, allowed a single intruder to pass. Sarah Vane knew all of this because she had spent 6 months studying them from a distance. She had watched them train at night through a sniper scope, recording their movements, their tells, their breathing patterns. She noticed that the left twin favored his right knee slightly, an old injury that made him hesitate before a spinning back kick. The right twin had a nervous habit of cracking his neck before engaging. She also noticed something else. They had never faced an opponent who fought like her. Every fighter they had ever beaten came from a background of power and aggression. Boxers, kickboxers, wrestlers, brawlers. They knew how to counter force with force. But Sarah did not fight with force. She fought with precision. She fought with timing. She fought with the philosophy of the empty mind, the yielding body, the strike that arrives before the thought. The plan was simple in theory, impossible in practice. The SEALs would create a diversion at the main gate, drawing the bulk of Cruz's security force into a firefight. Meanwhile, Sarah would enter through a drainage tunnel that had been missed by every satellite and drone. The tunnel was narrow, flooded, and infested with snakes, but it led directly to the basement of Cruz's private quarters. From there, she had 3 minutes to reach the server room, extract a data drive containing the identities of every beer in Cruz's network, and escape. The twins were stationed at the basement door. They would be waiting. The SEALs could not help her. The extraction helicopter could not land until the data was secure. She was alone. On the night of the operation, the air was thick with jungle heat and the smell of wet earth. Sarah moved through the drainage tunnel like a fish through murky water, her breath slow and controlled. She wore no armor, no helmet, no heavy boots, just a lightweight black bodysuit and a belt of thin, ceramic knives. Her legs were bare from the knee down. She wanted nothing that could slow her reflexes. When she emerged into the basement, the first thing she saw was the server room door, 20 meters away. The second thing she saw was the twins. They were not surprised. Somehow, they had known. The left twin smiled, a thin, ugly smile that did not reach his eyes. The right twin cracked his neck, the sound sharp as a breaking twig in the silence. They stepped forward in perfect unison, blocking her path. There was no room to run. No room to hide. The basement was a concrete box with a low ceiling and a single flickering light. The floor was slick with condensation. The twins spread out, one moving left, one moving right, trapping her in a pincer. Sarah did not move. She stood perfectly still, her hands open at her sides, her weight balanced on the balls of her feet. She was not afraid. Fear had been trained out of her years ago. Instead, she felt something colder: calculation. The left twin attacked first. He feinted with a left hook, then drove a knee toward her midsection. Sarah did not block. She did not retreat. She dropped her center of gravity by 6 inches and twisted her hips, allowing the knee to pass within a hair of her ribs. At the same time, she drove the heel of her palm into the soft spot beneath his armpit. It was not a powerful strike, but it was perfectly placed. His arm went numb. He grunted in surprise. The right twin saw the opening and lunged, throwing a brutal spinning back fist aimed at her temple. Sarah read it from the shift in his shoulders. She ducked under the arc of his fist and slid between them like a shadow, emerging behind their line of attack. For one heartbeat, the twins were confused. They had never faced an opponent who moved like water dot, but they adapted quickly. That was what made them dangerous. They reset their formation and came at her again, this time with kicks. Low kicks to the thighs, designed to destroy her mobility. The left twin threw a chopping kick to her left leg. Sarah lifted her leg at the last second, letting the kick pass under her foot, then stamped down on his shin. He howled. The right twin answered with a roundhouse kick to her ribs. Sarah caught it on her forearm, absorbing the impact with a rotation of her torso, then shoved his leg back at him, throwing him off balance. She could have ended it then. She had an opening to his throat, but she needed more than a fight. She needed to end it completely, without a chance for them to recover. And that meant waiting for the right moment. The fight continued for another 90 seconds. It was a brutal, silent chess match of feints and counters. The twins grew frustrated. They were used to dominating, not being frustrated. Their breathing became heavier. Their movements lost their surgical precision. Sarah saw the change. She saw the left twin hesitate on that bad knee. She saw the right twin overcome it on a straight punch. And then she saw the moment she had been waiting for. The left twin threw a desperate, looping overhand right. It was a wild punch, born of anger. Sarah stepped inside the arc of the punch, closer than he expected, and drove her left knee into his thigh with the full force of her hips. His leg buckled. He stumbled forward, off balance. And in that same instant, the right twin launched a brutal double kick. It was a rare, devastating technique. He jumped, twisted his body in midair, and kicked with both feet simultaneously. One foot aimed at her chest, the other at her head. If it landed, it would crush her sternum and shatter her skull. There was no blocking it. There was no dodging it. The kick was designed to be unstoppable. Sarah did not try to stop it. She did something the twins had never seen. She dropped flat to the ground, her back hitting the concrete floor, and let the double kick pass harmlessly over her body. The right twin's momentum carried him past her, and for a split second, both of his feet were in the air. He was completely exposed. Sarah moved like a spring uncoiling. From her back, she kicked upward with her right leg, her heel slamming into the inside of his knee. The joint bent the wrong way. He screamed. The sound was wet and high-pitched, the sound of a man who had just felt his own leg snap like a dry branch. But Sarah was not done. She rolled to her feet in one motion and faced the left twin, who was still hobbled from the knee to his thigh. He tried to retreat. She did not let him. She stepped forward and threw a low, vicious side kick to his standing leg, striking just above the ankle. The bone gave way with a crack that echoed off the concrete walls. He fell to the ground, clutching his shattered leg, his face pale with shock and pain. It had taken less than 3 seconds. 2 kicks. 2 broken legs. The twins, the undefeated guardians of the world's most dangerous man, lay writhing on the basement floor. They would never fight again. Sarah stood over them for a moment, her chest heaving, sweat dripping from her jaw. She felt no triumph, no anger, only the cold, mechanical satisfaction of a job done correctly. She stepped over their bodies and walked to the server room. The data drive was exactly where intelligence had said it would be. She pulled it from the slot, slipped it into her belt, and turned toward the extraction point. Behind her, the twins moaned in pain. The extraction should have been simple. Sarah had the drive. The twins were down. and the diversion at the main gate was drawing every available guard away from her exit route. But Eladio Cruz was not a man who left things to chance. He had one final layer of security, a contingency so extreme that even his own lieutenants did not know about it. Hidden in the walls of the compound were 282 active-duty Navy SEALs. Not retired, not mercenaries, active, elite, trained by the same teams that had supposedly sent Sarah on this mission. Cruz had not built his empire by accident. He had infiltrated the highest levels of the United States military, turning SEALs into his private army through a combination of blackmail, bribery, and ideological manipulation. These were not rogue operators acting alone. They were a shadow unit, officially listed as killed in action or missing in action, but very much alive and very much loyal to Cruz, and they were everywhere. Sarah learned this the hard way. She had just reached the basement stairwell when a door she had not noticed slid open, revealing a hidden corridor. From that corridor poured SEALs. Not one or two, dozens. They moved with the silent, terrifying efficiency of men who had spent years training to kill. They wore no insignia, no flags, no patches. Their faces were painted black. Their rifles were suppressed. And they did not ask questions. They simply raised their weapons and fired. Sarah dove behind a concrete pillar as bullets chewed into the wall behind her. She had no gun. She had only her knives and her legs. The SEALs spread out, using standard military tactics to flank her position. She counted the muzzle flashes. 10, 15, 20. More were coming from the corridor. She realized with sickening clarity that she had walked into a trap. The twins had not been the final defense. They had been bait. Cruz had known about the mission from the beginning. He had allowed her to enter, allowed her to fight the twins, allowed her to take the drive. And now he would kill her and use her death as a message to every intelligence agency in the world. You cannot touch me. But Sarah had not survived 16 years of shadows by giving up. She took a breath and analyzed the situation. The SEALs had numbers, firepower, and training. What they did not have was her knowledge of the basement. She had studied the blueprints for months. She knew that the pillar she was hiding behind was not solid concrete. It was a hollow column containing a ventilation shaft that led to the roof. If she could reach it, she could climb out of the kill box. The problem was the 20 meters of open floor between her and the shaft. The SEALs had it covered from 3 angles. Any movement would draw fire. She needed a distraction. She pulled one of her ceramic knives from her belt and threw it across the room. It clattered against a metal pipe, and the SEALs instinctively turned toward the sound. It was a tiny window, less than a second, but it was enough. Sarah sprinted from behind the pillar, her legs pumping, her body low. Bullets zipped past her head. One grazed her shoulder, burning a line of fire across her skin. She did not slow down. She reached the ventilation shaft, ripped off the cover, and dove inside. The shaft was narrow, barely wide enough for her shoulders. She crawled upward, using her elbows and toes for leverage, as bullets pinged off the metal below her. She heard shouts in English, orders to pursue. Then the sound of boots climbing into the shaft behind her. The climb was agonizing. The shaft was hot and dark, and her wounded shoulder screamed with every movement. But fear was a powerful fuel. She crawled faster, ignoring the pain, ignoring the blood that dripped down her arm. Behind her, the SEALs were gaining. They were bigger and stronger, but she was smaller and faster. She reached a junction and took the left branch, remembering the blueprints. This branch led to the roof. The right branch led to a dead end. She heard the SEALs hesitate behind her, then choose the right branch. Their shouts faded. She had bought herself a few more minutes. She burst onto the roof under a canopy of stars. The jungle stretched out in every direction, dark and endless. The extraction helicopter was supposed to be here, but the sky was empty. Cruz must have jammed their communications. She was alone on a roof, wounded, with nearly 300 SEALs hunting her. It was checkmate. Except Sarah had one move left. She had not told anyone about the backup plan. Not the SEALs who had sent her. Not the intelligence officers who had briefed her. The backup plan was hers alone, a secret she had built over years of paranoia. Hidden in the heel of her left boot was a small, cylindrical device. It was not a weapon. It was a signal beacon, encrypted with a code that only one person in the world could read. Her mentor, an old man named Kanpan, who had trained her in the mountains of Thailand. He was not a soldier or a spy. He was a farmer who had once been the deadliest fighter in Southeast Asia. He had promised her that if she ever sent that signal, he would come. No matter where, no matter when. She pressed the button. The beacon sent a single, silent pulse into the sky. Then she waited. The seals found her 7 minutes later. They poured onto the roof from multiple stairwells, surrounding her in a semicircle. 282 men in black, their rifles aimed at her heart. At their head was a man she recognized from the intelligence files. Commander Rafa Morrison, a SEAL legend who had been declared dead after a mission in Syria 5 years ago. He was very much alive. He walked toward her with the easy confidence of a man who had already won. "Sarah Vane," he said, "you put up a good fight. Better than most. But it's over. Give me the drive, and I'll make your death quick." Sarah did not answer. She stood with her feet shoulder-width apart, her hands open at her sides. Her wounded shoulder bled freely. Her legs trembled with exhaustion. But her eyes were calm. She looked past Morrison, past the seals, past the edge of the roof. She was waiting. Morrison sighed. "Have it your way." He raised his hand to give the order to fire. And then the sky exploded. It was not a helicopter. It was not a drone. It was a man. Kanpan, 72 years old, weighing no more than 120 pounds, dropped from the clouds like a meteor. He had jumped from a small cargo plane that had been flying at 15,000 feet, using a wingsuit to steer himself silently toward the roof. He landed without a sound, his bare feet touching the concrete with the softness of a falling leaf. The SEALs stared in disbelief. They had not seen him on radar. They had not heard him approach. He was simply there, an old man in ragged pants, his chest bare, his white hair tied in a knot. Morrison recovered quickly. "Kill them both," he ordered. The SEALs raised their rifles. But Kanpan moved faster than any of them could track. He stepped between Sarah and the line of fire, his hands tracing slow, circular patterns in the air. The first SEAL to pull the trigger found his rifle jammed. The second found his wrist broken. The third found himself flying backward through the air, his sternum cracked by a palm strike that had traveled less than 6 inches. Kanpan did not fight like a soldier. He fought like a force of nature, silent and inevitable. In 12 seconds, he had disabled 23 SEALs without killing a single one. He did not believe in killing. He believed in ending fights. The remaining SEALs hesitated. They had trained to face enemies with guns and bombs. They had never faced an old man who moved like smoke. Morrison shouted at them to hold their ground, but the damage was done. Fear had entered their ranks. And in that moment of confusion, Sarah moved. She did not attack the SEALs. She ran toward the edge of the roof and jumped. Behind her, Kanpan did the same. They fell together into the darkness, their bodies disappearing into the jungle canopy below. The SEALs fired blindly into the leaves, but the bullets found nothing. Sarah landed in the branches of a giant kapok tree, her fall broken by a net that Kanpan had rigged days earlier. He had been watching the compound for a week, waiting for her signal. He landed beside her, silent as a cat. She handed him the data drive. He tucked it into his waistband and helped her climb down the tree. By the time Morrison organized a search party, they were 3 miles into the jungle, following a path that only Kanpan knew. They walked through the night without speaking. At dawn, they reached a small river where a wooden boat was waiting. Kanpan helped Sarah into the boat and pushed off. The current carried them downstream, away from the compound, away from the SEALs, away from the life Sarah had known. She watched the jungle recede and felt something she had not felt in 16 years, peace. She had broken legs. She had outrun an army. She had saved the data that would bring down Cruz's empire. But more than that, she had learned that even in the darkest shadows, there was always a way out. You just had to know where to look. The boat rounded a bend in the river, and the jungle swallowed them whole. Behind them, the SEALs searched for hours, but they never found a trace. Sarah Vane disappeared that day, and no intelligence agency ever found her again. Some say she returned to Thailand to live quietly on Kanpan's farm. Others say she took on a new identity and continued her work in the shadows. But one thing is certain. The story of the woman who broke the legs of 2 giants and escaped 182 SEALs became a legend whispered in training rooms and safe houses around the world. They called her the ghost of the double kick, and they told her story to every new recruit as proof that the human body, when trained to its absolute limit,